Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.
Guys, welcome back to the After Action Review. You know me, I'm Nick Guy, the world's most okayest Green Beret. And as per usual, we have more than okay guests. Today, you guys are always talking about Spirited Strip. I have Spirited Strip. You've seen the posts on Instagram. You see them on Facebook. You see them on Twitter. Everybody's flexing with it. So today we have Adam Holroyd, the founder of Spirited Systems. And Adam, thanks so much for joining us, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on here.
So basically, before we get in, every guest I've had on here is military, and you're no exception. That's something I didn't know. That's something that a lot of people that follow Spiritus and buy Spiritus and use Spiritus knows. So, I mean, just give us a quick walkthrough of your time in.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated high school in 2005. I pretty much knew that I wanted to be in the military. Kind of sniffed out my options there and landed my decision with the Army. Joined the Army on just like a standard 11 Bravo contract. Completed basic training, all that nonsense, and was stationed up at Fort Drum, so the 10th Mountain Division. So I deployed into Afghanistan as like Joe Shit, the rifleman, in 2007, and that would prove to be kind of a defining deployment, kind of defining time in my life. So we were essentially, we deployed into northern Afghanistan, into the northeastern Kunar province, Korengal Valley, Pesh River Valley, names that people know now, but at the time, no one had any idea kind of where those places were, including myself. Deployed there, and we spent, our battalion spent 16 months on the ground. Our battalion was the first battalion to start kind of executing the whole combat outpost strategy. At our time, the lieutenant colonel, battalion commander in charge, was the one who, that was kind of his brainchild, as I understand it. It was kind of his doctrine that he was trying to implement. I think it was a good doctrine, but it was really hard on the regiment, because we were just out in the middle of nowhere, no support at all. Right. At that time, if you remember that time, the large focus was still Iraq, right? Pretty much the entire Army was focused on Iraq, and there was like this small contingent of Army and Marines in the Afghan theater, kind of holding it down there. But it was a defining deployment, because it really taught me a lot about, just warfare in general. And we really were. We were filling this kind of weird role, where we had a combat outpost, and we were, we had a Kandak of Afghan Army with us, and so really we were fulfilling this kind of train, advise, and assist role with this Kandak that entire deployment. It was a very kinetic. The regiment lost, almost 30 guys during that time. Yeah, it was just rough. I mean, it was really a lot of that Pesh River Valley, Korengal Valley. We just rooted ourselves into main supply line valleys we just were a pain, right? We were just there being a pain. So I came back from that. I was getting a soda out of a soda machine in my barracks, and there was an ad for like the battalion reconnaissance platoon. So, at that moment I decided that, I just wanted to do something else, right? I just wanted to try something else. So I went to their selection, and I passed that. And then it was kind of like a whirlwind of that year long, the regular Army, we pulled 16 months. We were back for barely 12 before our ADVON was already redeployed back to Afghanistan again. We went right back to the same theater. So it was like kind of a nightmare for a lot of guys. I was happy to go back to Afghanistan instead of Iraq, to be honest with you, but deployed back in a second deployment with the reconnaissance platoon as a sniper team leader. That rotation was definitely not as kinetic, but it had, some notable things like our battalion, specifically our platoon, was part of the response to Cop Keating. Okay. So if you know the whole Red Platoon, Cop Keating story, which was also kind of a defining moment in my life, right, is just seeing, you see a lot of the wins in the military. Not a lot of people have seen the losses. And that one was from so many levels, that was such a catastrophic failure in terms of, it wasn't a win for us, that's for sure. So that deployment, closed that one out, and I was actually stop loss that entire year. So I missed my stop loss. I missed my ETS date, my original one, by 1 day. Yeah, 1 day, man, and they would not let me out. But I'm glad they didn't, honestly. I'm glad they didn't, because there were a lot of people relying on me still, at that time in a leadership position. The Army was having a real hard time retaining its mid-level, sergeants and staff sergeants in the Army. So I'm glad that I stayed, but it was a year. I got back, and the Army doesn't give you a lot of choices for, they don't give you any decompression time to say, hey, let's give this guy 30 days to figure it out or something. They were basically like, you either have to re-enlist now, or you got to get out. And so I decided to get out. I went back to South Dakota, where at the time my fiance was still living. That's where I'm from, South Dakota. And I went back there and, did some different jobs, went to school for a little bit. Nothing really, it just wasn't the same. I was still too young. I got off the train too early. So I went back and I contracted for the State Department.
Okay.
And I was I basically went over on, some bullshit like security, the emergency response.
Is that the WHIPS program?
Yeah, it's on WHIPS. Yeah, I was a WHIPS. Okay. I have my WHIPS accreditation, but I wasn't on a mobile team. Okay. I was on basically a QRF element, right? Or CAT team, sometimes they're called that stuff. But so I was on that. But I didn't last long there. It just wasn't for me, right? The job, there's a lot of guys who are really into that personal close protection stuff. I just found it to be pretty mundane. The people you're dealing with are diplomatic, so they're diplomats. They're just,
you can say it. We drag them on Twitter all the time. You can call them nerds. That's what they are.
Yeah. They're nerds. They're very rude. And the whole time that I was contracting, you see these people and you are the proof that their diplomacy is not working, right? The fact that one USAID representative, in order for them to travel even a mile in Kabul, they have to have 14 heavily armed, killers get in vehicles and, whatever, just to kind of do that. It's the proof that it's not working. And so they hate you for it, because you're literally, they have to look at it every day. The big walls around the embassy, the fact that there's layers upon layers of security just to keep them safe. So it wasn't for me. So I got off that contract, and I was able to land a really interesting contract with the Department of Defense, doing, a battlefield consulting type of thing in Afghanistan, fielding equipment, like, rapid fielding initiative type stuff, which was really, really fun because we were doing, basically going out to all the outposts, kind of doing assessments on what they needed, fielding equipment to those outposts, just trying to get them stuff that, generally they just wouldn't have. It was funded, it's just funded in a different stream. So, talk about equipment needs and stuff like that. That's kind of the history. That's it. I mean, really.
I mean, that's, in kind of the span of a few years, that's still a hell of a history. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. I mean, I think people discount a lot of times their service. I have a lot of guys I served with who, they're like, oh man, I was just this, this or that. And it really is. I learned over the years that it's more about it's deeds, not words kind of situation. And you can have all the certificates and schools and everything, but if you never had the opportunity to use any of that stuff, what does it matter, for one? And two, there's some of the best and most qualified people that I've met. They're just, that's at their core. It has nothing to do with really where they've been, but more so with who they are as a person. So, I mean, I experience that a lot, especially contracting. I'm just going to say it, the most insufferable people on contract were those with who honestly is, the best dude on the team,
No, hands down. Absolutely. It's just, it's a weird dichotomy, especially with those personality types. But you're absolutely right. I mean, God, some of the most squared away dudes I know, they don't have a whole lot of certificates to hang on their wall, but God damn, they get after it when it mattered. So
Sure.
That's got to count for something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that 2007 deployment was so kinetic. It was kinetic in a way that I don't think a lot of people in this conflict have experienced. The Korengal Valley, Bella Aranis, and the Pesh River Valley, there was not one day that entire deployment where one of those outposts were not in a decisive contact situation, or at least one of their elements. I mean, there was hardly a day that I didn't fire some sort of weapon. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. It also teaches you a lot about just like I said before, warfare. And as a leader, it really did instill a lot of this kind of the seeds were sown during that deployment that really started Spiritus, because it was a lot of brilliance in the basics type stuff, right? Again, it's like maintenance of weapons, your own maintenance, your physical fitness, your equipment, accountability, like all of these things, they started to matter because my life depended on it. Not just because I had a sergeant telling me to do it. It was like, if I don't clean the 50 cal after every patrol, the 50 cal doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, somebody might die.
You're fucking dead.
Mean, that's just, yeah, exactly. It's like, we might not survive a contact. And the enemy was very tenacious during that. They were able to get us a couple times with, in decisive engagements, really, really large IEDs. I mean, just things like, they were very smart, capable enemy. And we did struggle at points to kind of combat that with limited resources. I mean, if we were going somewhere, we were walking, and it's Afghanistan. So, and there's no helicopters coming with any supplies, any resupplies. So, we were purifying water out of mountain streams. I mean, a lot of our planning was based around how far we could walk with how much weight. I was a RTO for a large portion of that deployment. So every patrol I was carrying, my radio, the 117 Fox, so double batteries, right? An emitter plus batteries for my lieutenant, right? And then I also never, it's just a personal pride point. I never, we had a standard loadout for the machine gun and for the mortars as well. So each guy carries a 100-round belt and two 60s. And it's just, I just would carry that too, young. I was very young. So it's, physically fit, but it was a lot of those lessons learned about packing equipment, how equipment works, how uncomfortable stuff gets, what guys actually want and need based off of like just the actual experience, of being in the mountains.
No, hands down. And one, you don't need to tell me how heavy radio shit gets. I'm an 18 Echo.
Okay.
I'm
So for sure.
I'm the comms guy.
Yeah, it's you have to do everything everybody else does, but carry like
Exactly
40 more pounds of stuff.
Yeah. Now I want to get to like those lessons learned and how Spirit was kind of founded, but I'm interested because you fell in during a period of GWOT where there weren't really lessons learned yet. Like you said, this was like the beginning of the comp strategy. Let's put a fucking fire base in a valley that's just surrounded by enfilade fields of fire and just let them come to us. In hindsight, that's a stupid idea. I had the benefit because I'm a little bit younger and I didn't enlist until I was older. I had all the benefit of all those lessons learned.
Sure.
When I deployed in support of GWOT. Back then, there were no lessons learned. Back in 07, we don't really only been fighting that war for 5 years.
Yeah.
And
conventionally for sure.
Yeah. And everybody knows Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. Everybody knows that. All you have to do is open up a history book and realize anybody that's ever tried to occupy, anybody that's ever tried to invade has failed. So going back through that and looking at that, I mean, that first deployment, were you junior enlisted? Were you an NCO yet for that first deployment?
Oh no, I deployed into Afghanistan I think I deployed in as an E2. Yeah, so I was junior. Yeah, I'm talking private status. I mean, I wasn't even at Fort Drum I wasn't even there for a year before. I went from basic to drum to deployment, very, very rapidly.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah, and it was just, so it was back to what you're saying, the strategy was new because at that time we had this, we had SOF go in initially. You hear all these amazing stories about the agency and Green Berets essentially wrangling the Northern Alliance and fighting back, right, as best as they could. And there's a lot of people who would say that that's probably the way that the war should have been handled in entirety, right? Is that the conventional side should have never, come into this conflict. I would say that there's a hybrid solution. That's what I think probably would have worked the best. But what happened was the conventional military, I shouldn't just say the Army, the conventional military was going to get theirs. There's no way a decade of war was going to go by without every single officer, not getting his experience, which is in one way, it's kind of funny to say, but it's also important. If there is a conflict going on, you want your leadership to understand what that means. So, I definitely agree with you. I think the strategy was fresh. It was new. When you
went in, like I said, we'd only been in Afghanistan, at least conventional side, for 5 years. Did you have the benefit of, you're talking about those officers that wanted their experience, but did you have the benefit, maybe not so much that PL, but your NCOs? Had they been exposed to combat up until that point or no?
Yeah, no, I actually was, I was very fortunate on that deployment. From my company commander down, I had very, very strong leaders. I had a very excellent team leader. He was killed on that deployment, but he was an excellent team leader. I had, my lieutenant was an excellent lieutenant. He was also killed on that deployment. And then, the lieutenant that replaced him is when I became the RTO. He was a very good leader, a very strong leader. So, I had like a lot of mentorship, right? But also pretty much all of the E5s and E6s of that deployment were, you know, junior enlisted or privates previously in Iraq, right?
Okay.
Not a lot of people had Afghanistan experience, which really bit us in the ass in a way. But so we did have combat experience, although not to the same level. And it's interesting how that affected some guy. We had two kind of leaders, or two kind of like veterans of a conflict in our battalion. We had those who had served in Iraq, who then got into Afghanistan and recognized very quickly that this was a different animal and adapted to that. And then we also had a bunch of guys who mentally collapsed very quickly, physically collapsed, honestly, on some of the movements, because they were expecting a very different kind of war, right? We had guys pack like Xboxes in their tote boxes, right? And then all of a sudden, we were living on the side of a mountain for 45 days in a foxhole. I mean, a literal 2 standard foxhole, you know, like we were just in place. And so these guys were, I think there was a lot of psychological effects from being deployed for 16 months, right? Guys, and I didn't realize as a junior enlisted guy with really, you know, I had my girlfriend back home. I didn't have anything else. I didn't have a house. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a dog. I didn't have a mortgage. So I was like, I don't understand why everybody's having such a hard time. Now that I'm older and I understand some of the psychological pressure that a guy can be under, I really do. I am amazed by some of my leadership, you know, like they were going through divorces, you know, people had kids who were sick, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on mentally, that they were dealing with the harshness of that deployment, but also their life was falling apart back in the States and there was nothing they could do about it. I mean, we were at the best, we were at a 7-day rotation, to where we could rotate back to Asadabad for 1 day, and we could, you know, do laundry, eat hot chow, take a shower, you know, service our trucks, pick up mail, that kind of thing. And then we went back out. That was the best case scenario. You know, I think it was more normal for us to be out longer than that. But you know, it was rough on guys for sure.
And that's a really underreported, undertold story of Afghanistan, at least from that period.
Sure.
Because everything coming out, you know, people have this idea of FOBs, and people expect ODAs to go out and live in the shit. Like they expect SF teams to do that. They don't expect like an entire company of infantry dudes to do that anymore. And
sure.
You know, outside of maybe reading a few books on the matter, there was a one documentary about Korengal.
Restrepo?
Restrepo.
Yep, that was the 173rd. They replaced us, actually both deployments.
Okay. And that was definitely more that, you know, that cop living, which is still really shitty. Really shitty living. But,
yeah,
you know, outside of like reading certain things, I don't think people realize that. Like, dudes you're right. Like, we're living in no shit foxholes. And
it was weird. It was weird. I mean, it was, I describe sometimes to people when they want to hear about it, just like the living conditions and just, you know, every day it wears on you mentally. And this is nothing new. I mean, we know about combat stress. We know how people manage some of these things, but I can just recall instances of seeing, you know, completely capable, completely, you know, mentally stable, you know, men reach the limit of what they, you know, mentally could handle. You know, it's just too much. The fear was too much. And it was just, and there was just times where I saw extreme cases of valor that no one will ever hear about. You know, it's very hard for a conventional side. Pretty much, in order for a conventional Army dude to get anything above like an ARCOM, is somebody has to be in trouble. Essentially, if you notice, all the Medal of Honor, you know, recipients like in the Army, it's very embarrassing how we handle awards in the Army. Everybody has this this idea that what they're going through isn't as bad as what a guy in Vietnam went through, or you're just doing your job or whatever, you know? So it's kind of this weird thing. But I mean, I witnessed a lot on that deployment that really affected who, you know, where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do with Spiritus, and kind of collecting the right people to make this happen.
No, absolutely. All right. So lessons learned between humping all that shit up and down the Afghan mountains. What works, what doesn't, what's comfortable, what wears, what digs in, going through the rapid fielding of equipment when you did your DoD contracting side. What was the impetus for Spiritus Systems?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that the first deployment was when I mean, my whole life I've always been like, everybody always says, like, it's so cliche, like, they're into the outdoors, right? I grew up in Colorado with, you know, my dad was really into hiking and camping and fishing, and so I was just outside a lot. And that's when I started to learn that there were these things that can make your life easier or better out, you know, when you're out in the wilderness, right? Like, I mean, I think my dad bought one of the first dome tents, you know, with like the flexible poles that come apart. It was, I think the brand was Hillary, you know, Hillary, obviously Mount Everest, stuff like that. So it was kind of cool that I started experiencing that at a young age. And I was always just like, it kind of got me into equipment, even at a young age. I was always impressed with, like, somebody invented something that's just to make your life easier, right? And then I got into Afghanistan, where at first we were only, you know, regular Army. It was like, you will use the things that the regular Army issued you, you know? But that went out the door very quickly when our command element was also stuck out in the middle of nowhere. You know, I mean, I remember very vividly, our company commander essentially said, look, you guys can purchase hiking, like actual mountaineering boots. It's going to come out of your own pocket, but, you know, you can do it. So I went and I immediately bought some Oslo, is that how you say it? I don't even know.
Solo, yeah.
A Solo boots. Like, I mean, like, this is 2007, right? Nobody even heard of a boot like that. And we were just, you know, our platoon sergeant was like, hey, I found these boots. They're good. If you want to buy them, you can. So, you know, it kind of started there of really the backpacking and mountaineering. They've already figured a lot of this stuff out, right? And so I started purchasing things. You know, I'd find a problem. I'm like, man, I wonder if there's a solution. You know, throwing out my canteens for Nalgene bottles. You know, just like these little things that improve the quality of life. And I considered myself to be a professional. Even at a young age, I was like, this is my only job. This is my only function in life. So purchasing a piece of kit, you know, people make fun of you. You're the gear queer, they say. You know, you have all the cool stuff. I'm a professional is actually what it is. And I care about my, you know, a saying that I like is, how much is your life worth? You know, like, is it worth it to you to have a sleeping bag that is more comfortable so you're more well-rested? So that's where I started to really get, like, that first deployment was when I really started augmenting my kit with things that are already pre-made. Mm-hmm. And this was like, you know, Spiritus was I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my life at that point. Second deployment was where I started modifying equipment, or like that time in between and that second deployment. So you know, we got issued the IOTV like vest. This thing was like this gargantuan piece of shit. I was so upset at the RFI, you know, like loadout at Fort Drum when they issued the vest to us. They did this big like presentation and they flopped this thing out on the desk. And I looked at the guy in front of my entire chain of command at the battalion level, and I said, "Are you serious?" And they all, like, I just saw every one of them, like, Sergeant Major, like, just looking at me like, I'm going to kill you if you say anything. Right? You know, and I was so pissed off, though, that we were about to get issued this. You know, I knew we were going back to Afghanistan. They told us we were getting a new plate carrier. I figured any reasonable person who knew what we just went through, you know, we had the Interceptor, body armor, IBA, right? The one that closes like an actual vest, right? You like put it on and like it has the 3 snaps on it or whatever. We had just worn that for 16 months and it was garbage. And then now they were handing us something that was worse. We were going in the wrong direction. And it stunned me in a way that, like, I had trusted the Army I don't know why, but I had trusted the Army to like do the right thing. And they gave us this IOTV and I was so upset with it that I took it back to my barracks room and I started to figure out, how do I make this not as bad as it is? So I did things that I probably should not have done, but I cut pieces off. I took like the frag lining out of it. It just had plates in it. I didn't have like the MOLLE cummerbund or side plates on the sides. I just had the elastic. I wore a chest rig instead. It's like, I had all these lessons learned. And our new sergeant major he'd come out of Ranger Battalion. Right. And so he had such a fucked up opinion on equipment because his deployment had been his experience was so much different. But who am I to like look at this guy and say, hey man, this whole idea you have about equipment is fucked up. Like, we're not going into, I call it war tourism, right? Where you basically, and I'm not taking away from any Rangers deployment, right? Because it's just a different job. Those guys they're at a higher level of training. They have more funding. They have a selection process that they can get rid of people who don't belong there. And they have a very specific mission, very pointed mission. We are not any of those things. We're going to be walking the mountains on our, like literally just boot leather express. And we're going to be carrying all of our own weight. And there's no helicopters.
It's unsexy.
Yeah, it's not sexy. But to me, our whole function was to walk the mountains, to try to outwit the enemy and literally kill as many of those fucks as we could. And it was, it was just a difference in opinion, but he really wanted us to have all of our pouches mollied directly to our vest, right? Which anyone in Afghanistan knows, dude, you're going to stop and you're going to dig into a patrol base and you're going to want to take your pouches off. You're going to want to have a chest rig so that when you're digging a hole or when you're just on guard, just kind of like chilling, at an OP or something, you're not going to want to have all that weight on you 24 hours a day. What he didn't realize is that, we don't deploy like Ranger Regiment. We don't go to Jalalabad and, wait for a target packet to come down, all jump on a couple of Chinooks and fly to an objective, walk a kilometer, assault it, and then leave. That's just not how the conventional force fights a war. And historically, it's not how they're ever going to fight a war or have ever fought a war or ever will fight a war, right? It's just not the same. And so I started picking up these nuggets of like, it doesn't matter what the sergeant major really thinks. He doesn't know. It's not that he's stupid. He just has never experienced it. And so then I just started thinking about that experience that I have or have had, and that a lot of guys just don't understand. And you probably have seen it. Guys don't understand equipment. You see a guy and he's uncomfortable all the time, and it's because all of his straps are loose and his rucksack is like sitting too low and his helmet's on backwards. And you're like, you are causing all this pain to yourself because you don't understand the equipment. That's when I really understand all these modifications I'm doing. And guys were seeing it, right? They're like, man, I took like a duffel bag and I cut a big chunk out of it. And then I sewed I sewed like a placard, right? Like a hand stitched with fishing line, like a 3 mag shingle placard on the front of my IOTV, right? Just to try to trim it down, make it smaller. And I carried multiple weapon systems. So the pouches, were a little baggy. So I could fit, my AR mags, or I could fit like the 110 mags in there, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where it really, that's when I started experimenting with building my own stuff. I got out and I still was tinkering around, but nothing serious. And when it really came back around was when I deployed with the DoD in 2014, doing that, fielding that equipment, I actually had the opportunity to link up with a longtime friend of mine in Afghanistan who had joined the Army late in life, and he was deployed down in Kandahar. And so I met up with him, and I was so shocked to see that, like, I got out in 2010. It's now 2014. He's deployed, and he's still wearing the same IOTV, same garbage. Like, we haven't learned any lessons. We haven't done any research. We haven't asked. All they have to do is ask a private, like, hey, man, you like this vest? And he will fucking tell you that he does not like it. And so I was so shocked, and we started talking about it. And I told him, like, hey, I want to do this thing. I think we should do this. I've known him for a really long time, like since literally like kindergarten, like age, like really, really long time. And I was like, we need to start, we should start something, and we didn't really know what it was. It was kind of organically happening. But we decided that we were just going to do something, whatever it was. So we started off just like, the first thing because we were both in Afghanistan, we couldn't like really make anything. So we're like, well, let's just make like some t-shirts, and we'll just start making t-shirts. So we started making some t-shirts, and my wife was actually back in South Dakota fulfilling all of these orders. Right. And I say all of them. I mean, I think like my dad and like a couple of my friends and like no one who ever cared. Like, it was just like, and there were like some guys that I was contracted with at the State Department who like, they were just trying to help me out. So like that early, like $800 we made was all just, people we knew. And just like for reference, we still had some of those shirts. We had bought so many of those shirts. I think the last ones sold at the beginning of this year. Right. That's how long those things have been haunting us forever. But yeah, so we started the company. And it's actually three of us, right? So there's myself, and then Zane, who is, he was also Army. He was in the 82nd Airborne. And then my wife is the other partner. So there's three partners who own the company right now. And we're still privately held and, just kind of doing our own thing. But that's how it got to this point. When I got back, Zane was still deployed. I got back. I immediately went to Craigslist and I just typed in sewing machine, and I bought some like home sewing machine off some nice lady on Craigslist. And that's where the first ideas started coming from. I knew from my State Department days that I wanted a small chest rig that, could carry 3 magazines, but it had to have some way of switching to some kind of sniper weapon system magazines. And I knew I just wanted to have a small IFAK, and that's it. And that's how the Microfight was born. Is I literally just hand jammed a Microfight up because it was a deficiency I saw. We were getting issued these really large chest rigs, really a good chest rig from Velocity Systems, but just it was big, and I just wanted something smaller. So that's how our first, product was kind of born, where the Microfight was kind of born. And just, we migrated, it was in my attic of my house, completely funded by me. It was just like I was working at a radio company, so as a sales engineer. So I was making money doing that during the day, and then I'd come home and we would like work for another 8 hours, like trying to just produce kit. Then we moved into my garage. We bought like industrial sewing machines. I couldn't park any vehicles in my garage, completely full of sewing machines, rolls of fabric. We were just learning, right? Making those first products. And then I don't remember when, I'm bad with dates, but then we moved out of the garage into where we are now. And we've just kind of been taking over this entire building we're in, one kind of area at a time. It's a shared use building. So, but yeah, that's basically the genesis of it. Right.
I mean, that's incredible. First off, the whole lessons learned with kit thing, hands down. Yes. I did my first deployment. I wasn't issued an IOTV. I don't know if you don't know. I mean, the listeners to this know. I was an 18 X-ray. I was an SF baby. I didn't spend a single day in the Army. I finished basic infantry OSIT airborne, and I immediately went into the into selection, the qualification course. So I never had to deal with that. However, at a much smaller scale, my first deployment, I wasn't really a gear queer. I wasn't doing anything like that. Some lessons learned from the Q course, little things like the canteens. Canteens suck. You can't, especially if you're living in like an austere environment and your water source is not clean.
Yeah. How do you clean it?
Exactly. You can't clean a canteen thoroughly. So like little things like, all right, Nalgene. Okay, let's get rid of the 1 quart holders on your flick and let's throw like some Nalgene. I think High Speed Gear made like a Nalgene.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a taco style kind of deal. Throw those on your flick. So little lessons learned there just from like, the Q course. Going into my first deployment, they issue this huge, it is a nice kit. It's Crye's AVS.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So it's a plate carrier that sits on a harness, and it's really nice. It's super comfortable.
Yeah, it's really advanced.
It's big. It's big. First deployment, we were in and out of Hiluxes and Land Cruisers the entire time, which are not big.
No, they're not.
And that AVS was just massive. So I tried cutting it down. I took the harnesses off, turned it into just like a regular plate carrier, but it wasn't really designed for that, so it wasn't super comfortable. So I upgraded to like a Crye JPC.
Sure.
Threw that on. It was great. It was great for getting in and out of tiny vehicles. It had everything I need. Then I became a JTAC. And all of a sudden I needed more real estate.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I am now. In like trying to perfect kit. But you're absolutely right. It's just these little lessons. I just don't have the intestinal fortitude to say, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna build my own.
Yeah. It's a big leap. It's a big leap. I mean, I think you have to, the reason why Spiritus is successful is it's definitely not because of myself, right? I mean, Zane is very much, he is very much a process driven person. So, if I come with an idea, if I go and I'm very good at I have a keen eye for looking at somebody and going, oh man, why are you carrying that way? Like body mechanics, just understanding what, in that 16 months on that first deployment, it flushed out body mechanics for me. I understand payloading and just how you need to carry the weight to go long distance. And, but Zane is very good at, turning something that is just an abstract into reality. Right. And, we get it all the time. A lot of people go, hey, I just need you to sew this thing onto this thing. And I'm like, in your mind is very good at making things make sense that don't make sense. That's why people buy powder blue Mustangs. It's like, why do you, it's like not, don't do that. But your mind somehow talks you into it. It's the same with measurements and people will see things. I'm like, you don't understand. It's not going to fit. Right. So he's very good at that. He's very good at a lot of stuff. And then my wife is this kind of, this third arm who she's basically our operations manager, right? And she is very, again, data, looking at big data, right? Not stupid data, big data, understanding trends and what's selling and what's not, and just all this stuff. It is so much more than just making the thing, and that's really what makes it into a business. Anybody is an idea guy. Everybody has ideas. You have ideas all day. You're like, man, I wish there was a widget that helped me with this or whatever. But it's how do you get that thing from the idea all the way to a product that somebody's buying on the internet is really what makes it a business, right? And it's a big leap. And we had no experience in manufacturing textiles, right? It's just Zane said something really interesting to me early on. He said, I was kind of having a doubt about a product. I was like, I don't know if we can do this or whatever. And he was just like, man, he's like, other people have done it. That means that we can do it. And that really, I've used that kind of, that phrase over the years. Every time I'm kind of hitting a roadblock is I'm not doing something new. I'm not doing something that's so far out and abstract that I can't do it. Somebody else has done it. Somebody else has sewn textiles. Somebody else has invented textiles. We can invent textile. We can do these things, you know? So it really is that. I credit our success to this kind of, you know, the base was this triangle of personalities that are very different and that meld well together. And then we're able to build a team of people. I mean, we have like some really, really good employees who they basically, every time I replace one of my jobs, I try to find somebody better than me, right? It's like, find somebody who embarrasses you, honestly, professionally. Like, find somebody that you wish you were and have them do that job and just let it go. So yeah, I mean, it's having the idea is the easy part, honestly. It really is.
Well, execution is always the hardest part of the mission. It's easy to plan.
Mhm.
Anybody can plan. Second lieutenants can plan.
That's very true. Very true. They can do that well. They can plan a lot.
Is there any sort of irony that you see that you design this whole system based off of lessons learned as a conventional cat, and just something as simple as, hey, you're going to dig this foxhole. You're going to want to drop armor because you're here for the long haul. You're going to want to institute your rest plan. You're going to want to take a shit. You're going to want to sit down and eat chow, but you don't want to lose access to your essentials, your radio, your ammo.
Yep.
Is there any sort of irony in the fact that, like, your kit gets lapped up by soft dudes like myself that, like, you know, you designed it for this, and there's some truth to that. You know, in SF we like to say the only difference between SF and any other soldier is a mastery of the basics, doing all the unsexy stuff really well. But I mean, that's who uses it operationally. That's not who's just buying it, because there's dude, the internet is. It's funny taking a look into some corners of the internet.
It is a savage place.
But into, you know, even your customer base, and it's not a bad thing that people buy a kit. It's just maybe not the intended audience. I mean,
it's totally. We every time we make something, the focus is, you know, the actual tactical end user, whether it's, you know, a soft guy or whether it's a police officer or whatever it is, right? That's always the intent. But it's definitely not the only customer we have. I mean, there's everywhere. It's all the way from, I'd say, like the far left of the spectrum, which would be like the airsoft kid with his mom's credit card, all the way to, like, you know, the most tier one guy who buys his own stuff as well. You know, it's like everybody in between is a customer. So it's I think the irony there, I mean, I think the real point, and the thing that I've learned the most, is that you're right about the mastery and the basics, right? That is what I felt like, you know, being a conventional soldier, I always looked up to the soft counterpart, right? Everybody, you kind of whisper when you see a bunch of Hiluxes go by. Dudes are in the back with like dual 240s and like sitting on like a recliner or whatever, you know, like, it's just like, you always look at him and you're like, oh my God, like that dude knows everything I know plus more. Right. And what I learned is that that's absolutely true for the guy who is a true, like, special operations professional. Right. And you meet, and it's just like everywhere else, there's good people and there's bad people. But the difference is that I was always trying to master those basics as a professional soldier, right? I was very much focused on, in our platoon, being in a reconnaissance platoon, you are focused on small unit tactics. That's all you do, you know, all for a year-long train up. Every day you're just patrolling, essentially.
5 principles of patrolling, just over and over and over.
Just patrolling. I mean, and it's, you know, and that in any soldier, whatever level, if they're not familiar with like the fundamentals of patrolling, they just can't stack those other tasks on top of it. And so, you know, and that's the thing, is seeking out training after the Army as well. You know, we have a very good relationship with the Direct Action Resource Center down in Arkansas. Yeah, and it's helped us out a lot because it's given perspective that I didn't have professionally to me, right? Rich has been able to open a door into his world of experience, honestly, and any other instructor that he has down there. So it's been a really good resource for us because I can place myself into scenarios that are as close to the real thing. And if if you've been there, I think you would agree. It's as close to, it's a simulation, but it's as close as you can get without actually doing it. But the cool thing about being in that simulation is that the concepts of equipment and load bearing equipment are the same. That's one of the things that are translated well. There's stuff that isn't translated well in any simulation, but the thing that is equipment. It's easy. I can go down there and participate in all sorts of different types of training personally. I can wear the kit personally, and I can also observe, what guys are doing and how they're wearing their stuff and what they need. So that's been a tremendous resource. But even, Darcy, it still comes down to, following the SOP and the basics of, it's nothing fancy. It really isn't, kind of when you pull the veil back. It's just the guys who do it professionally at the highest tiers, they just do it all the time,
They do.
all the time.
And they're very good at it. I've said it once before. I've said it on Twitter. I've said it a million times. I think once you pull that veil out, I think, and you realize that at least and I'm not a DA guy. I'm not a CRIF dude. I'm not a SIF dude. I'm not a tier 1 dude. I'm a line ODA dude my entire career and will continue to be. I'm not a CQB expert. However, I think it would shock a lot of people just once you pull the veil back, just how slow and methodical and basic things are when it's done at the highest levels. People have this idea in their mind, and they do. They have this image in their mind, and I don't know where they get it, but that's it'd be shocking for a lot of people, and that's. Honestly, I think that's kind of cool that you kind of have that resource to constantly tinker with.
Yeah,
because kit's important. I wanted to have you on because one, I wanted to hear your story of service because that's something that I hadn't heard. But two, kit is important. It's easy to say, hey, that guy's he's a gear queer, he's a geardo or something like that. But it is important. It allows you to do your job at the highest levels. So if you're creating a product that's constantly evolving, I think that's a good thing, especially in my line of work.
Yeah, and if you're a professional, I think there's no question. If you're a professional, you seek out the tools that you need. I mean, it's no different than a mechanic at a shop, right? Maybe there's a shop set of tools when he gets hired and he's allowed to use that, but over years and years and years, he has accumulated the right tools. And he's not buying the stuff from Harbor Freight. He's buying like Matco tools or Snap-on or whatever, and he's investing in himself because he knows that it's going to make his job run more smoothly, but it's also he's going to depend on it when he needs to. And people, I agree. I always agree with, you'll hear a lot of people on the internet who talk, and they'll talk about training. And I 100% agree. Like, if you're not out there attempting to do the task and replicate conditions, you're never going to understand. Your body's never going to understand how to react to it in real life. But, if you're also focusing solely on training and you never square away your equipment, you're handicapping yourself in a very similar way, right? It's just, guys who actually do stuff, they just know, you just know, like, that's not going to work. That equipment's not going to work. Your Condor plate carrier, it's not good enough. It just is what it is. And I shouldn't have said that on this podcast, but it just is what it is.
Listen, if I can figure out, I'm an echo, I should figure out, I'll bleep that if I can.
Yeah, bleep that out so that nobody knows who I said. So they'll all think it's them too.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows. It's not good enough. It's not professional grade, and you should, and if there's any purchasers listening, please don't do that to your guys. Please don't. It's something we struggle with a lot with mostly our law enforcement customers right now. Is we're priced very competitively in my humble opinion, but we are constantly battling purchasers who are like, well, you know, Billy Bob from whatever company came out, took us to dinner, and they're going to give it to us for 50% off of what yours costs. And I'm like, you're really getting what you pay for. I'm telling you, you're getting what you pay for. Yeah, so I caution others to stay away from. There's a lot of good kit. Spiritus is not the only kit company out there. There's a lot of really good kit companies out there. But you know, the kind of the few that rise to the top each time are the ones you should probably go with. You know, really.
I would agree. And it's a small the community that actually uses the product in the real world. They talk. Everybody talks.
Sure.
Everybody has their opinion. And guys they can call upon a wealth of knowledge in terms of, hey, I rocked this piece of kit versus that, and it worked versus it didn't work. It is what it is, and you learn. You learn it. That kind of just goes along the foundations of your company of lessons learned.
Sure. And that's still what we, so much is based off of, either our lessons learned or others. And we really don't set out on a path to a product unless there's a need, unless somebody has unless through our network, which is pretty extensive now, of professional end users who are still out there doing the job, right? That's where we get our feedback. I mean, we don't set out on a product just because we think it would be cool. Everything you see that comes out, there is an end user somewhere that probably got the first prototype batch of that and did batch testing or whatever for us. So that's kind of how, that's how it works for us, right? A user will come with a problem set. And if it's in line with kind of where we're going as a company, then we will, we will accept that as kind of a challenge. We'll try to come up with the piece that works, and then we'll start producing it for prototyping. And then when it's all kind of flushed out, then we'll produce it and sell it. And we have very few items that are not sold to the public. So basically, if we make it, we try to post it for use, with the exception of anything that is sensitive, obviously, or anything that we just think like the guy's not going to be able to afford to have an ISLID, so he doesn't need an ISLID pouch. So
I see it sitting behind you.
What's that? Oh, that ISLID? That little guy?
That little guy?
That little guy right there?
That's a nice little one too. That's not the lightsaber.
Yeah, that's not the big one. No, that's actually an inert model. So just in case Mr. Matt Myers is watching this, that I have that on bailment from B.E. Myers for photography. So I definitely don't want anybody to think that we have some falling off the truck property sitting there.
But no, you're absolutely right. It's know your audience, and it's kind of cool to know that there's still consideration being done for, especially those higher end users, like somebody that might have a need for it. Yeah, the public does, like you said, the public really need an ISLID or an inert to complete their airsoft loadout? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. I mean, it's I mean, I don't know if you've seen, we've been getting hit pretty hard on, our inventory right now, our stocking. One of the biggest challenges we have, the internet is a sewer. It's an absolute sewer. I mean, it is just garbage, hot garbage. So we're constantly combating, people's opinions essentially. And it's, the weirdest stuff with people I got a comment the other day and it just said, make more stuff. Like, I don't know. It's like, just make more. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, we got to hire this guy for our, we got to replace our operations because he gets it. You just got to make more stuff. It's like we are at max capacity. I mean, we have sewers working overtime. We have, we are just churning products out, but it does not matter. It does not matter how much we increase our volume. I mean, we're trying to, we can only increase at such a rate, right? There's space, there's machines. We have to train the sewers. All this stuff has to happen in order to get just one sewer in the door. But, even when we double our output, we just sell out of everything. The minute we post it, it just sells out.
I've noticed.
Yeah, it's very difficult right now. We're working on it though. I mean, I guess if there was a message is that that's Zane's realm. That's really heavy into Zane's realm. There's not a day that goes by that he isn't working on some part of the company that is, basically increasing our capacity in some way, right? COVID has been a little bit of a detriment, mainly on supply line. We've been open this whole time, but I mean, a lot of the mills are not open. A lot of the factories that make stuff that we consume are not open. And so that, that's definitely been affecting some of our supply chain as well lately.
That's business.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
And you're not the only one. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, and it's good for us. I mean, I'm glad that every time I think we posted a couple hundred multicam plate bags, right? Sets. And I mean, those things went out of stock in like 45 minutes. And that was such an incredible thing to me because it was the largest number we had ever produced. And I mean, I think it was so large that it eclipsed like the last 3 productions that we had done. And we still just sold out. It's just insane. We just can't grow fast enough.
You've got yourself a cult following. I mean, you
Sure.
really do. Which is awesome. That's great for you. But yeah, it always makes me laugh when I see something drop and I'll log on 2 days late.
Gone.
And I'm like, wow, I could use that. And boop,
It's gone.
gone.
Yep. We have some cool stuff so back panel, that's another thing. I guess you heard it here first. That thing is, it is different than any other back panel that's ever been built. It's different in a lot of different ways that I couldn't possibly articulate, like without showing you, like having an example, but it's basically like this hybrid concept of, what I noticed is we have these very defined back panels between, you have like your backpack. Everybody has like a backpack. They follow kind of the same recipe, right? There's the backpack, there's the MOLLE, and then there's like the assault panel. And those are kind of like your 3 flavors, right? But if you're wearing the assault panel, you're kind of limited because it's very defined. It's for a very specific direct action role.
You're in a stack and somebody behind you needs a flashbang.
Yep, that's the name, assault panel, and that's what you're doing. You're assaulting, right? The MOLLE one, MOLLE just sucks because it's extra material, but it's awesome because you can configure it however you want. And then you have the pack, which I see a lot of guys defaulting to the pack because it's just like, just throw stuff in it, whatever, you can just throw whatever in it. And ours is like it's a hybrid. It's definitely a hybrid. It's modular. So it has a removable flap system on the top. So you can have an assault flap on there that can hold flashbangs. You can have a GP flap. That's just a big GP pouch. We have a MOLLE flap in the works. So you can, if you have a special kind of flashbang or, whatever, you want to put a bunch of thermobarics up there or something, you can have that yourself. That can carry tools, but it's also converts into a pack, right? So it has a beaver tail that pops out to allow you to fit tools in it, but this beaver tail is the width of the entire back panel. So you can, you could stuff like your entire puff top in there. You could put a 117 Golf in there if you wanted to, right? So it's we wanted to make this kind of hybrid panel that, like, you can get a lot of use out of the same panel regardless of your position on the team, right? So that is going to be, it took longer than we'd hoped. We definitely were hoping that was going to be out the end of Q2. But some good news today that it's basically finalized and it's getting prepped into sewing now, which means that the needles are about to drop on fabric, and it is however long it takes to produce the first run is what it's going to be. So that's really good news. I mean, that means they're right around the corner pretty much.
Well, the Spirit of Symptoms Facebook group will be very happy to hear.
Yeah, they're going to be very excited. I'll post that. Hey, if you want to find out about the back panel, listen to the podcast.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All new users, all new listeners. I love it.
There you go.
Well, brother, I don't want to keep you too long. I really appreciated you sitting down, sharing your story, because again, it's not something I've heard. I'm sure it's not something that most people who even use your products have heard.
Sure.
It adds a lot of context into your current line of work, which is always good to know. It's good to know, if anybody's looking to buy kit or upgrade kit, that it's coming from a place of lessons learned, been there, done that, and not only that, but constantly, evolving, with access to programs like Darcy. So that's incredible. So can't thank you enough, guys. Thanks for watching / listening, no matter how you're consuming this. If you're watching on YouTube, God, I hate saying it, but like, comment, subscribe, because it helps. It helps spread with the algorithms to put my shit on the on home pages. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, give me a 5-star review, leave a comment. Adam, can't thank you enough, brother.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time to have me on here.
Hey, take care.